Welcome to Voice It, podcast showcasing people in the Clare Valley and the mid-north of South Australia who've started their own businesses from scratch and have turned them into success stories. This is a chance for them to tell you their story. I'm your host, Annabelle Homer.
It's Dave Heinjus. I'm the CEO of Pinion Advisory. I'm also the global chairman.
Oh,
yeah.
That sounds very, very prestigious.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary, really.
Yeah. Is that an extra pay grade?
No, it's a non-remunerated role.
But it sounds good.
It does. It's a bit of a flex.
What and who is Pinion Advisory? Well, this episode's definitely not about birds or mechanical engineering. Far from it, in fact. It's about a bloke that started as a one-man show in agribusiness consulting and now chairs a multinational company called Pinion. It's a leading-edge national agribusiness, water and environment consulting firm with tentacles reaching across Australia and into America. And it all started right here in South Australia's mid-north in the Clare Valley. Before Pinion, Dave Heinjus founded Rural Directions in 1997 in the Clare Valley, one of the first agribusiness consultancies in the state. It started with just him, and now he manages over 100 people on his team. After 23 years, he led the merger integrating Rural Directions with 3 other Australian companies to form Pinion. In this podcast, you'll hear his journey from his early days working as a contractor with the Department of Ag, branching into self-employment with Rural Directions, the late nights, the ongoing study, balancing all that with a young family, to then chairing a global company. But let's start with Dave's early days, growing up on the family farm on the western edge of the Barossa near Freeling, a farm that he still manages today. Enjoy the journey with Dave Heinjus, a journey he reflects back on and can't believe he is where he is today.
I grew up on a little farm at Freeling, just on the western edge of the Barossa Valley. Got a brother and a sister, and my parents, my dad had been on the farm all his life. Like, he left school at the age of 12, had been working on the farm. Yeah, so I grew up there and went to a local primary school, local high school.
And was it a mixed cropping operation?
Yeah, we had sheep. So Dad had a Suffolk sheep stud. He used to trade merinos, and he used to crop a little bit. It was more of a sheep farm than a grain farm at that time.
And being on the western side of the Barossa, I guess the reputation of the Barossa is that it's God's country for growing grain. Are you in that spot too?
We are.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but I was kissed on the bum by a fairy, really. We have been kissed on the bum by a fairy. Like, our ancestors came from Mecklenburg in Germany, and they came to Australia in 1846. And they were farmers in Mecklenburg in Germany, and they were farmers at New Mecklenburg here in Australia on the western side of the Barossa, and that area is now known as Gomersall. So in the First World War, they changed all the names. New Mecklenburg became Gomersall. There was Mecklenburg, and they moved to Australia and they created New Mecklenburg. I'm not actually sure where the original farm is. I think I know, but yeah, we're not on the original farm.
Okay, so it was you and your brother?
Chris, yep, and we have a sister between us, Kathy.
And you've taken over the farm?
Yep. So after we left school, Chris went to Urbray in Adelaide, and I obviously went to Gawler High, and then I went to Roseworthy. And as I finished there, Chris went to Roseworthy as well. So my grandfather was really keen for me to go straight back to the farm. And my mother said, no, that's not going to happen. So he wanted me to basically repeat the process that Dad went through. So leave at the age of 12 or 14. And
so your grandfather had quite an influence on you then?
It was an interesting dynamic. It was not a very good succession planning process that I watched between my grandfather and my father, unfortunately. But yeah, he wanted me back, and my parents said, no, we want Dave and Chris to go to Roseworthy, and then after that we'll see what happens. My grandfather retired at the age of 80, and it was interesting. I often relay this to clients, but I was actually walking down the main street of Gawler, and I ran into my grandparents, and it was my final year at Roseworthy, and my grandfather said, I'm pleased to have run into you. And I said, why is that? He said, my grandmother and I are going to look at a house here in Gawler, and if we like it, we think we're going to buy it, and we want you to come back and take over the farm. And I said, well, I've got a few plans. Yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to work. But how about you and Grandma go and have a look at this house. If you like it, buy it. And then how about Dad and I will come and have a meeting with you tomorrow? And he goes, oh, okay, no worries. So they bought the house, and the following day Dad and I went and had a meeting, and then Dad ended up leasing Grandpa's part of the farm and bought his machinery, and then Dad started farming and I was supporting him, but I actually went on and did more study, and then I ended up working.
So what was the relationship like between your father and his father?
Terrible. It was
getting that impression.
It was awful, yeah. Probably a few skeletons out of the closet here, but it wasn't too flash at all.
Well, considering he was bypassing a generation
Correct.
about the farm.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal, and I didn't think that was appropriate. So Dad, it was his farm, and he'd worked there all his life. It wasn't for me to come in and say this is what was going to happen.
And what was the relationship like between you and your father?
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, we get on really well. Yeah, no, and still to this day, yeah, we it's an awesome relationship. The relationship we have with both our parents, my mother passed away about 5-6 years ago, but the relationship we have with him is awesome.
Did he like farming? Was he a good farmer?
Yeah, he was a really good farmer. Yeah, when he took over the farm, like I sat down with Dad and we did a whole analysis, like I do. Like we did unpack the whole farm basically. Where's the money being made? Because they'd bought another block and were under a bit of financial stress because this is in the mid-'80s. So they were... interest rates were 20+% interest. Like I remember seeing one statement come through and my parents were paying 24% interest.
You just can't fathom that, can you?
No. It shapes you for your future decision making. Yeah. You lose a quarter of your income. It's huge. It's a lot. So, yeah.
That would have broke so many people.
It did. It broke a lot. A lot of people who extended themselves, they didn't make it. And plenty... I got lots of clients now who we talk to, and, it influences their risk profile now, even today.
I bet.
30, 40 years later.
How did your dad deal with it?
So he had this sheep stud, which was a cracking little sheep stud, and he'd always sell all his rams every year. Like he'd produce about 40 rams a year, and he'd sell those, but they were just taking up way too much area. So we just looked at, okay, if we cropped the farm and didn't have these sheep, how would they go? Through that process, Dad said, okay, we're better off not doing the stud because it took a lot of time as well, and it was only him, where before it was him and Grandpa. So we elected to disperse the stud. So that's what we did.
What was the stud called?
It was called Will to Win was the name of it, which I thought was an awesome name. That was disbanded. And then we were doing some sheep work one weekend, and it was just after they'd removed the wool floor price, and Chris was working for Elders at the time. He was a stock agent with Elders, and so we were buying and selling sheep and all this sort of stuff, and we had quite a few sheep on the farm at one stage, and one Saturday morning we were doing this sheep work, and I said to Dad, and I said, I'm not really liking what the commentary is at the moment around the floor price scheme, and Dad said, no, I'm not. I don't really like it either. So this was like 2-3 weeks before the government pulled the pin on the reserve price scheme for wool. So it was a minimum price that you would actually achieve for your wool. And I was thinking all the research I'd done had shown every reserve price scheme had always failed. It always was disbanded at some point. And I mentioned this to Dad and Chris. We sort of had just a meeting in the sheep yards, and Dad said, how easy do you reckon these sheep are to sell, Chris? And he goes, oh no, I can move them this week. And we said, right, let's do it. At the time, I think we had about 800 ewes. So we sold them and all got quite reasonable money. A month later, the wool floor price scheme was disbanded, and you could hardly give away a sheep after that.
So what time was this?
That would have been in the late 80s, early 90s.
And how old were you at this point
making
these decisions?
20, I would have been 25. Honestly, we just had a conversation and we just said, no, this is the way to go. But it was a big decision to make at the time, and then we decided to crop everything at that point. So it was extraordinary, really. When you look back at it, you go, well, it was a brilliant decision, but it was also a lot of luck. I often say luck's just labouring under correct knowledge. It's an acronym. We made the decision and we lived by it, and it worked out well.
You were working with your father on the property at this point?
At that point, I was working part-time. So both Chris and I were working off-farm. So Chris was working for, as I said, Elders as a stock agent, and I was working for the Department of Agriculture. So I was, I had a number of different roles. I was always on contract. They're never permanent roles. They were pretty skinny. My first contract was 1 year, and I was contracted to write a book on farm tree planting. which I did, which turns out in hindsight, I was just way ahead. You know, a lot of land care and all this sort of stuff is all modern stuff today, but that was 1986.
Oh, yeah, ahead of your time.
Yeah, so I wrote that. So that was published, which is pretty cool.
What did you want to do when you went to uni? Or
Well, I actually did.
was there like an overall end game for you?
Well, it was interesting that I was going to Roseworthy. That was all I wanted to do, was go to Roseworthy. And it had 3 boxes there which I could pick. So one was ag, one was natural resource management, one was winemaking. And I really didn't care. I just wanted to go to Roseworthy.
Why? Why did you want to go to Roseworthy?
That's just what I wanted to do. And I had no, it was weird. Anyway, so I actually went eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and I landed on natural resource management. So that's what I studied at Roseworthy. And then when I finished there, I did an applied science degree at Canberra University, or was Canberra College of Advanced Education at the time. And that was in 1985. That was a applied science degree where I majored in water science. And then...
and you lived in Canberra for a year?
I lived in Canberra for a year.
Yep.
And then I came back here and I picked up a contract with Department of Ag writing that book. And then I spent 8 months up at Jamestown working on a soil conservation project up in the Flinders Ranges. That project finished, and then I moved to Loxton in the Murray Mallee, and I ran a farm management project out there where I was doing a lot of early no-till trials and looking at the economics of no-till and farm business management decision-making and all those sorts of stuff.
And is that when no-till was really coming in?
Yeah, hardly. It was only really... Back then it was just very, very early. So, did some of the very early trials of no-till in the Mallee. And, of course, everything's no-till out there now and everywhere. That felt pretty good. And then I was out there 3 years, and then I came to Clare and I set up what was called Property Management Planning Program, and I ran that here 6 years. So I had...
Who was that with?
That was also a Department of Agriculture.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah, so the Property Management Planning Program was a farm business management and soil conservation, land management type program that we ran out, designed it, developed the program, and then extended it. And around 20% of South Australia's farmers ended up doing that program, which was huge uptake. Yeah, and then after that, I had an entrepreneurial seizure, and we decided that we would start Rural Directions.
Entrepreneurial seizure, I love it.
Yeah. So when I was in Department of Ag, they sent me on a program called the Enterprise Workshop, and that changed my life. That's where I discovered business and business planning and that whole process. So...
but you must have had the knack for it
Yeah,
anyway.
I think I did. Because when I was growing up, I was always doing stuff at the farm. And like a lot of kids, I bred geese, and Dad would take hay up to the Adelaide Hills and come back with a few potty calves, and we would then feed them up and sell them and stuff like that. So that was all pretty good.
You were having entrepreneurial seizures at the age of
7. So anyway, so my parents wanted to retire. At that stage, Chris had finished at Elders and he was working for the Australian Wheat Board. He was looking after the National Pulse book for AWB, and I was a program manager at that point. So we were in the Department of Ag. My parents wanted to retire, and we went, okay, that's fine. We're pretty keen to go back to the farm. But the farm wasn't big enough. Well, Chris had just been recently married, and myself and Sarah were the same. So we needed another string to our bow. We couldn't just farm. We talked about doing all sorts of things. We thought, we could buy trucks, we could run trucks, we could build a piggery, we could start a consulting business. And so that's what we decided to do. I remember talking to, it was actually Bill Long, who I was actually at Ag College with, and Bill said to me, he said, Dave, he said, consulting and farming's really tricky. You just got to balance everything, and it can be quite awkward when you need to be on a tractor, you need to be consulting, or all these sorts of things. You always end up with these conflicts, which I thought was very wise. It was good advice. I didn't want to be like the mechanic, right? Who the mechanic always has the dodgiest car. I want to make sure if we're going to be consulting, we're going to make sure our farm is tickety-boo, is showcase.
Yeah, practice what you preach.
Exactly. I had that comment from Bill in the back of my mind, and I was just going, right, I've got to really make sure we do this right, and which is what we've always done. So, I think I'm really proud of the farm. It's in a really good spot, and it always looks pretty good and performs pretty well.
Then how did you balance that then? How did
we
you
employed
make
we employed a manager.
Employed a manager,
yeah. Well, because the difficulty was, my first week of Rural Directions, I secured a Commonwealth Government contract. So I used some of my old networks, which was useful. But that contract was enormous. It was like $1.5 million contract in day 5. And I just went, my goodness, we're going to have to deliver on this. So I said to them, I need like cash flow. We're just starting out. Cash flow is an issue. I said, is it possible to actually pay us quarterly in advance? And they went, no, that's fine. I said, I'm going to need a bit more equipment as well. Is it all right if I use some of these funds to, buy a laptop and mobile phone? Yep, no worries. Let's go. And we were away. And so we had basically a 3-year contract paid in advance to get our business going. Honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better start. It was phenomenal. And then not long after that, I secured a contract. So that contract ended up going for 5 years. And then I secured a contract not long after. It was about week 6 with Australian Wool Innovation, running a program for them.
And these are contracts you put a tender in for?
Yeah.
These didn't land in your lap.
No. We had to bid for them. And the AWI one ended up going for 10 years. Like, that was a huge contract for us. Like, I'm just so grateful to those people and those companies that they took a risk with us as well. Like, it's phenomenal.
And you started Rural Directions in 1997.
Correct.
And it was just you and Chris at that time?
Yeah, it was me to start with. And then Chris started 9 months later. And he started working together. We started the grain marketing service. And then he was working part-time at the farm and part-time in Rural Directions. And then as that scaled up, he needed to spend full-time in Rural Directions and the rest of the time. And we would just go and do weekends or after hours and stuff like that. But we had to employ people there. So we had a farm manager who was just, fantastic at the time.
So when did you start employing people at Rural Directions and actually building a big team?
That first contract, we had to employ someone straight away. By the end of year 1, I think we ended up with a team. It was about 4 or 5 of us. And then we progressively just organically grew after that. Obviously now it's crazy. We got, I think it's 105 people in our team in Pinion now.
Oh, wow. We'll talk about Pinion in just a moment. Let's go back to Rural Directions. And the core of Rural Directions, you said it was a consultancy, but what was your major focus? So
in Rural Directions, we had 3 arrows because I always like the 3-legged stool analogy. Each leg needed to be very solid. So the 3 drivers of a farm is production, price, and management. So if we can produce grain or sheep or wool, whatever we're going to produce in a really productive way, optimised way, and then we can optimise the price, then that gives us the best income that we can have.
Yep.
But often people, they know all the theory, but sometimes they don't always pull the whole package together. So the management side of things is also very, very important. So we always had 3 arrows. So yield by price by management is essentially that's what gives us the best outcome for a farm.
So you had these contracts, but aside from that, were farmers coming to you or you approaching farmers?
No, farmers were coming to us.
Farmers were coming to you.
Yeah. So we had ended up with a project with the pork industry. I touched base with an old ag college mate, so Tony Craddock, and so Tony and I were the same year at Roseworthy, and then we worked together in the Department of Agriculture. And I said to Tony, I really need someone who can help us with this project. I said, and because he hinted that he was, he wanted to move into private enterprise. And so I said, okay, no worries, let's do it. So he came on board and then he rang me halfway through the week. He goes, I think we might need someone else for this pork project. And I said, why is that? He said, I let a few people know that I was leaving and I've had 25 people ring me saying, can I do their agronomy work? And I just went, oh my goodness, that's unbelievable. And so when you get to that pool marketing, I'm just so grateful, honestly, that people took a risk. But you
obviously had the reputation behind you as well, otherwise people wouldn't have come.
No, I understand that, but I never want to take that for granted because without clients, we don't have a business. We always have to provide value, create value, and be of value to the client. Otherwise, we've got nothing. You're always moving forward and always thinking about how you can do things better.
So let's talk about that. Moving forward, starting a business, growing the business, not growing too fast, making sure you're still delivering on that quality. What was probably some of the biggest challenges that you faced with Rural Directions?
There were plenty. What was the year when the pricing was okay and then prices went up and a drought hit? That was awful. That period was pretty ordinary.
How many times did that happen?
There was one year where it was really awful and that wasn't too much fun. But on the whole, it's been amazing. All up, we're 27 years now and gone from me to 105 in Australia. Yeah, So it's extraordinary. So there's been a lot of hurdles, but, you just solve them along the way. And
so you never got to a stage where rural directions where you had a year or a few years where you thought, oh my goodness, things are pretty tough, we need to reassess.
No.
It never got to that stage.
No, it never got to that point. When we started, we said, we'll give this 10 years. And if it doesn't work in 10 years, we'll wind it up and we'll go do something else. But, here we are 27 years later. I'm a glass half full person always. And it's just, well, this has happened. Now let's fix it. Let's move forward. I don't dwell too much on it. You just got to keep moving forward, stay positive and more importantly, keep your team positive because, if I start getting woe is me, then the team will start bailing. The team retention's been amazing. We've got people here who've been here.
Yeah, have you got people here that have been with you from the start?
Yeah, pretty well.
That's a good sign,
Our
isn't
farm
it?
manager's been with us for 17 years. It's
But
phenomenal.
obviously you're a good employer because you wouldn't hang around otherwise, would you?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
And also families involved in the business as
Yeah,
well.
well, Sarah, she was, when we first started, we were working from our house here in Clare before kids. And so Sarah, she was a radiographer, so she was driving to Gawler each day and then she'd come home and then she'd type up reports or
So where did you
do
meet
the books.
Sarah?
Oh, that's an interesting story. We actually grew up together. We were good mates before we got together. Yeah, we're a pretty good partnership. Yeah, Sarah would do the books at night and type up reports, and there were some nights we'd be going till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and then she'd then turn around, drive to Gawler, work all day, come home, we'd have tea, and then we'd do it all again. It was ridiculous what we did. Absolutely ridiculous. But, we had a philosophy that you do whatever it took.
So when you had rural directions in those early days, I presume you had to keep training yourself to be up with the modern trends. What did you do in relation to education?
There was a couple of things I did. I did the company directors course, which was back in the really early days of rural directions. And then I had the opportunity to do a master's degree in entrepreneurship. That was at Adelaide Uni. That was a crazy period because I was working full time, running the business, and we had little kids, and I was doing a master's degree. So I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning, study through till 7.
And how long did you do that for?
That was 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, my sleep patterns were completely shot at the end of it. Yeah, but it was great fun. I learned so much.
Great fun.
Oh yeah, it was good. A mind stretched never returns to its original shape. So I love that term because the more you study, the more you learn. Your brain will never go back after it's been stretched.
And when did the kids turn up?
Ben's now 20. He's 24. So Ben turned up when we were still working from home, and that's when we chose to have our first office here in Clare. So our first office was a little house, which is where Calabi Real Estate and Rabobank is. We had a little house there. Then we bought an R&D business from Alan Mayfield. So one of our agronomists wanted to get into some R&D, so we bought that from him. And then, we did a lot of contract research work. We kept that R&D business going for a while, and then we wound that up. We want to just focus more on the consulting side of things. Yeah.
So you've got Ben, and how many kids do you have?
2. Yeah, Ben's 24. He works for the ANZ Bank. So he got into their grad program, and he's now a relationship credit manager in corporate agribusiness in Melbourne. Yeah, so he's doing really, really well. He's working on the big end of town in Victoria. And Em's at uni. She's studying to be a primary teacher. She's also doing really, really well. She's a cracker.
You didn't want any of them to take over this
I was pretty
business?
keen, but they've said, you guys work way too hard. We might start something another day. We've got some ideas.
Oh.
Yeah, we've got some business ideas that we think we could expand.
Can I get the scoop?
Watch this space. Yeah. I've got to focus on this business for the time being.
I presume that your farm was wrapped up in the whole pinery fire as well.
Yeah.
So how was that time?
Well, that was pretty ordinary. Obviously it was ordinary. We lost a client, lots of clients and friends, lost houses and properties and machinery and stuff like that. I actually flew in from Perth that morning for work, and I got a text. I had some notifications on my phone, and it was saying there was a fire here at Clare. And of course I went, oh shit, that's not good. And then they said, then I got another text saying, no, that one's out. And then I got a text from saying there was a fire at Pinery, and I just went, oh, well, that's 40 odd Ks away. I don't need to worry about that, but that's not good because I could tell the weather wasn't too flash. And then I got a text from my son saying, oh, here, you're in town, do you want to have lunch? And he was had exams at the time, and so I texted him. I said, "Yeah, no worries. I'll come and pick you up from school, and we'll go and have lunch." Anyway, just as I picked him up, my phone was starting to go off, and I said, "Oh, sorry, mate. I think I'll leave you here at school, and I'm going to head to the farm." And I was heading to the farm. I never got there. So we had a number of employees at the time, and so Dad and two employees were at his place, and Chris was with two employees at his place. And I was talking to Chris, and he said, "I got to go. This is going to be a disaster." And the fear in his voice was, I'll never ever forget it. And I just hung up, and I went, shit, I hope I'm going to talk to him again. And then about 10 minutes later, he rang me back. He said, "Oh, it's gone through." He said his place looked like a bomb site. He reckoned the flames were going through. We had a full crop there. He reckoned they were 15 metres high at the time. It was just horrendous. And he had a lot of pine trees around his house and stuff like that. So they sheltered in a shed. And then after it had gone through, then they went round and they were mopping up. And if he wasn't there, he would have lost his house. There's no doubt about it. It was awful. It was interesting, though. Like, that was a Wednesday. The Thursday, Sarah and I went around and we assessed every fence, every bit of loss. And then I met with the insurance company on the Friday at 9 o'clock. It was extraordinary. And with the assessor, and like I presented this whole report, costings, all this sort of stuff. And then we had full payout the following Monday in our bank account. It was amazing.
Wow.
And then we went and bought a semi-trailer load of fencing materials and got going. But we were still harvesting. At the end of the day, we were lucky. We didn't lose houses. We lost a ute, heaps of fencing, honestly.
Yeah.
But anyway, onwards and upwards.
So Rural Directions, as you said, been around for a couple of decades. I presume there was a few other farm consultancy kind of businesses around as well. I think Rural Solutions, which was the government. That
was the government one.
Government one, which folded.
Yeah, that's right. They wound that up.
Yeah. So when that happened, you got more of the market, I presume. So things were working in your favour.
Yeah, they were. There's lots of consultants out there, but most of them work for themselves. So there's very few companies per se. And
were you one of the first in the state?
Yeah.
So
I wasn't too far behind. There was a few people who, people like Alan Mayfield, who, he was a big influence really in the early days. So, he was some of the first. Mick Faulkner had been in the game for many, many years.
But they were working for themselves.
Correct.
Yeah. You took it to a different level.
Completely different level. Yeah. I wanted to create a business. I didn't want to just have a job. If I wanted to have a job, I could go work for someone else and be probably just as better off. So our objective was always to create a business. And that's been awesome in terms of the rewards that it's provided us and our team. But also, back in 2010, we decided that we needed, we've been going for a while, so 10 years. We needed to have a bit of a break. And so, we took the kids out of school and we went and chased barramundi in the Northern Territory for 7 weeks. You need to be able to do that in business. You have to have some balance. You just can't keep working the whole time. So I look back at some of those trips that we did and I'm just so grateful. And the relationships we've got with our kids are just amazing.
2020, you formed Pinion.
Yeah, who does that in a pandemic?
Yes, exactly. So why did you do it in the first place?
Well, it was... we use AgWorld, so the agronomy software, and I got an email from Doug Fitch, their then CEO, and Doug was doing a lot of work in America. So Doug sent me an email saying, he wanted to introduce me to a guy over from America called Jeff Wald. And this email actually went into my trash, and I never check my trash. I normally just clear it out every couple of months and that's it. But this day I actually scrolled down and I thought, Doug sent me an email, what that is. So I released that and read it and he said, I want to bring some people to meet with you. And I said, okay. So they came here, it was March, it was in 18, I reckon. And it was an awful day, terrible day here. I was embarrassed about the weather. It was 43 degrees, blowing northerly. It was a disgusting, putrid day. Anyway, they turned up. The whole idea was just to meet and greet. So I gave a presentation on Rural Directions, then Doug did a presentation on AgWorld, and then then Jeff did a presentation of his business in America, which was essentially an accounting company, but they were doing a lot of ag consulting work as well. And we said, okay, that's all good. And then...
Well, why did you do it? You must have had your feelers out.
No, not at all. No, this was, they cold called me. No, I was quite happy where we were. Anyway, so then I was then talking to Jeff afterwards and I said, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to do business with you. And I said, okay, well, what does that mean? I said, you can have a line and one end is a collaboration and then the other end is a merger. What what would you like to do? He says, no, I want to merge with you. And I went, oh my goodness, right, okay, well, I better come to America. So I went to America. So Simon Vogt, one of our directors, and I went to America, and we had a series of meetings over a week, and we met up with some clients over there. At that point, we decided, let's just keep talking and let's work out how we might do business together and what that might involve. So eventually, what happened was on the 1st of April 2020, we were supposed to launch Pinion. So a pinion it's a cog that drives a bigger gear. So you've got rack and pinion steering, so that's a cog that drives the rack, so that provides direction, or it's a small cog that drives a large cog. And you often see them on locomotives and things like that. You might have a small cog. Anyway, I said to Dad, I said, we're thinking of creating a whole new business, and we were merging, which meant we were merging with 2 other companies here in Australia, 2 businesses that we've done a lot of work with over the years, because we wanted to create a critical mass and then have this relationship with America. So I talked to Dad and I said, this is conceptually what we're looking to do. He's, yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I said, do you want me to tell you what we're going to be called? And he goes, yeah, that'd be great. I said, we're going to be called Pinion. And he goes, And I said, do you know what a pinion is? And he goes, yeah, nothing works without a pinion. And I went, spot on. And so that felt good. So yeah, on July 1, 2020, we launched Pinion as a merged business. So we merged a business in Tasmania called Macquarie Franklin, a business in the Sunraysia called Sunraysia Environmental and Rural Directions together to create Pinion. And that meant that we ended up doing a lot of work, more environmental work and a lot of water work. So
why did you want to branch into the water side of things?
Because water is everything. I remember I studied water science back in 1985 because for me water was everything, and everything was going to revolve around water in the future. So I always wanted to head in that direction. And then we took over integrated another business last year called Hydroplan into the company. So so about 40% of our business now is water. And so, we're doing some amazing projects. So we're designing 6 new irrigation schemes in Tasmania, doing some fundamental initial design work for the next tranche of the Ord River scheme in the Northern Territory. Some amazing projects.
And this other 60% is agronomy?
Agronomy, farm business management, grain marketing and environmental. So we do a lot of environmental work, environmental compliance work, things like designing of effluent systems, effluent management systems and circular economies and all that sort of stuff.
So with that connection with America, with that American company, are you doing any work in America?
Yeah, we are. Pinion is an Australian-owned business, and though Jeff has now rebranded their business in America, Pinion. So we have Pinion in Australia and Pinion in America. And so America is owned by the American partners, Australia is owned by the Australian partners, but now we are moving towards we have an intellectual property sharing agreement. So essentially all the IP that we've created here in Australia, we are now sharing with America, and they have some IP that they are now sharing with us in Australia. And then from 1st of April next year, we'll have a income sharing agreement. So we'll be sharing our income moving forward.
Oh, so what projects?
As a multinational
company.
Yeah.
So, did you ever imagine that you'd turn into a multinational company?
Never. So I'm, as I mentioned right at the beginning, I'm the Australian CEO and the global chairman. So we have 105 people in Australia, and there's like 650 in America. It's amazing. I pinch myself every day.
What ideally would you like to happen? Would you like to be taken over and then live a comfortable life in retirement now? Are you in that situation? Well,
the business model that we've now adopted is a partner model as opposed to a shareholding model, which is what we had before. And so the partner model, what this enables is employees to actually become partners. So they put up some working capital and they become a partner. I'm actually hard dated, so in about 5 years' time, I finish up, and then people behind me then take over my role. So I've got this amazing succession plan in place, highly motivated employees because they can all see that they can actually become a shareholder or they can become a partner in this business. It's known as a perpetual business model. Our clients all have perpetual business models, like farms are multi-generational. We couldn't see why we couldn't actually create a multi-generational consulting business to support our clients.
Is that a usual thing
Yeah,
in business
it's
sense?
actually not unusual. It's unusual in an ag consulting business. This is the first time it's ever been done, to my knowledge, in agriculture consulting. But in law and in accountancy, it's not an unusual model to follow.
Just going back a step, you mentioned this American company approaches you, they come here, they do their pitch on a 43-degree day, and then they say they want to merge with you. It wasn't on your radar. You weren't looking to do that.
No.
So what changed your mind? What was it that thought, maybe this is the way to go?
It was actually this perpetual business model.
It's his business model that appealed to you.
Yeah. And it enabled, and they underwrote the transition from the old model to the new model. And it enables our young guys here in the company to actually become a partner and actually have a stake in a significant agribusiness in the future. So I've done well. I've done really well, right? And hopefully I'm humble about it. These sorts of interviews are very rare, so I don't do them very often. But I want to create a future for the guys, the people, the young women and men in our company who've enabled me to do the things I've been able to do. I want them to have that same opportunity.
And how many have taken on that perpetual
we've got
business?
We've taken on 3 new ones this year. It doesn't sound like many, but there'll be more, significantly more as we move forward over the next 5-6 years. Yeah.
So where are you going to be in 10 years' time?
I'll be fishing.
So when
or I could be back at the farm in 10 years. I could be back at the farm, working on some new. I do have some ideas that I want to put in place. So and that might be our next side hustle to the farm. But in 10 years' time, I won't.
Keeping me hanging.
Yeah,
honestly.
I know. It's good, isn't it? Sarah and I will be just fishing and camping and
Have you got an end date?
Yeah.
For Pinion?
I have. For me, yes, I have. Yeah, it's March 31, 2029. It's hard dated, and it's already slipped once.
What do you mean it slipped once?
The big cheese, so the global CEO wanted me to stay a little bit longer. So anyway, at the moment, it's March 31, 2029. It's hard dated. And so I'm working
towards that
and we'll make sure the company's in a really good spot. No one's indispensable.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. My wife has been amazing. Our kids have been amazing. Our team's been amazing. My parents have been amazing. My business partners have been amazing. So, yeah.
Well, I can't wait to hear what you do on the farm or what this side hustle is. I'm intrigued.
Oh, we'll get there. It's one step at a time.
Well, hard work pays off. Well done, Dave and Sarah. And I've got to say, I've marked your end date in my calendar and I'll be giving you a call to find out what's next in store. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate and review and share it with your network. The more listens, the more it will be visible to everyone. I've been loving all the feedback from previous episodes featuring George Millington, Kelly, and even those earlier episodes with Rowan Welke and Deb Scammell. I love how people are tapping into Voice It and sharing those older episodes as well. Thank you. More episodes are still to come. The next one I'm editing is moving away from the world of ag and checking in on a dance school with the difference. Subscribe to this podcast if you want to hear all about Cape Mensforth and the rise and rise of the Clare Valley School of Dance. That's coming up in the next episode. I'll catch you then.